Hello, historians! If you clicked on this video, that means you are interested in learning a little bit more about William Shakespeare. And I have to say, he is one of my favorites that we cover during this Renaissance unit, so I'm very glad you're here. So here is the slide that we saw in our previous presentation. It gives you his job, when he was born, when he died, and what he was best known for, as well as a picture of him. And this is actually one of the only surviving portraits that we have of Shakespeare. So William Shakespeare was born in Stratford-upon-Avon, England, in 1564. This was the sixth year of the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. Shakespeare was christened on April 26th of that year. And a christening is basically just a baptism. It's when you go through, especially during this time, it's when you go through the formal process of naming your baby, getting your baby baptized. So Shakespeare was the third child and oldest son of John and Mary Arden Shakespeare. Two sisters, Joan and Margaret, died before he was born. The other children were Gilbert, a second Joan, Anne, Richard, and Edmund. Only the second Joan outlived William. Nothing definite is known about Shakespeare's boyhood. And you'll see this a lot in this presentation, that we don't know a lot of facts about Shakespeare. There are even conspiracy theories that Shakespeare didn't really exist at all. But because of the content of his plays, it is thought that he must learn early about the woods and fields, about birds, insects, and small animals, about trades and outdoor sports, and about the country people he later portrayed in such good humor. Then and later, Shakespeare must have picked up an amazing stock of facts about hunting, hawking, fishing, dances, music, and other arts and sports. Among other subjects, he also must have learned about alchemy, astrology, folklore, medicine, and law. And as good writers do, Shakespeare must have collected information from both books and daily observations about the world around him. By 1592, so remember, we don't know anything about his early life, really. But by 1592, he was definitely in London, and he was already recognized as an actor and a playwright. He was then 28 years old. In that year, Robert Greene, another playwright, accused Shakespeare of borrowing from the plays of others. So he was accused of plagiarism. Between 1592 and 1594, plague kept the London theaters closed most of the time. So this wasn't the Black Plague like we learned about in our Middle Ages unit, but a plague is just a sickness that the majority of people in a civilization catch. During these years, Shakespeare wrote his earliest sonnets, which is a type of short poem, and two long narrative poems. So a narrative poem is a poem that tells a story, and it can be very, very long, even as long as a book. Both were printed by Richard Feld, a schoolmate from Stratford. These long poems were received well and helped establish Shakespeare as a poet instead of just a playwright. From about 1594 onward, Shakespeare was an important member of a theatrical company called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. It became the most successful company of actors in England. Shakespeare continued to write more and more plays. They became well loved by the people of London, and Shakespeare is even credited in inventing some English words and phrases that we still use today. So, for an example of some of these, that could be cold-blooded. If anyone's called you cold-blooded, Shakespeare came up with that. He came up with the word fashionable and comfortable, and many, many more words and phrases that we use in our everyday lives. So, Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603, and King James I followed her to the throne. Shakespeare's flourishing theatrical company, the Lord Chamberlain's Men, was taken under the king's patronage and was renamed the King's Men. Shakespeare and the other actors were made officers of the royal household. In 1608 to 09, the company began to form regularly at the Blackfriars Theatre. This was a smaller and more aristocratic theater than the Globe, which was the theater that Shakespeare premiered most of his plays at. And the Globe is still up today. They still run plays there, even though it's like 1,000-year-old building. But the Globe was a large open-air public playhouse. That basically meant you can picture the Colosseum almost. It's open to air. There's a big stage in front, and people were packed in like at a concert. But while the Globe was public and large and open air, Blackfriars was a private indoor theater with high admission charges. Thereafter, the company alternated between the two playhouses, with Blackfriars becoming the theater for the winter season because it was always a little too cold to do plays at the Globe in the winter. Plays by Shakespeare were also performed at the royal court and in the castles of the nobles. And so these are Shakespeare's achievements. Once again, we saw those on the other slide. These are 3 achievements that you can choose from to write your essay about. And as of this point, you are officially done with your notes. You can go ahead and start researching some of those links.